FM Attack, the brainchild of Canadian producer and musician Shawn Ward, began as a small electronic project in the late 2000s. Known for its nostalgic sound, FM Attack draws heavily from synthwave and 80s-inspired synth-pop, capturing the essence of retro-futurism in music. When Ward first started the project, he joked that his biggest challenge wasn't finding the right sound, but figuring out how to make his synths stop buzzing during live performances. Despite the early hiccups, the project quickly gained traction among fans of electronic music, thanks to its unique fusion of modern beats with vintage synth sounds. The band's debut album, Dramatic, released in 2009, was born from Ward's love for synthesizers and 80s music. Interestingly, the album's title was inspired by a typo. Ward had meant to call it Dramatic, but after misspelling it, he decided that Dreamatic sounded cooler. FM Attack's early gigs were also known for their intimate settings, where the audience was sometimes smaller than the number of synths on stage. Ward once joked that if his music career didn't work out, he could always open a vintage synth museum with his collection. Before FM Attack gained popularity, Ward played around with different musical styles, including house and electro. However, his love for all things retro kept pulling him back to the 80s sound, much to the amusement of his friends, who often teased him about living in the wrong decade. In fact, at one of FM Attack's first shows, Ward wore a full 80s tracksuit as a joke, but it ended up becoming a signature look for his performances, with fans even showing up in similar outfits. As the project began to grow, FM Attack's sound became more polished, but Ward never lost his sense of humor. One time during a live set, he accidentally triggered the wrong sample, causing a random voice clip from an old infomercial to play through the speakers. Instead of stopping the performance, he rolled with it, mixing the infomercial audio into the song, and later joking that it was his way of selling synths to the masses. FM Attack's music often features dreamy, nostalgic melodies, but Ward likes to keep things light-hearted behind the scenes. During one recording session, he brought a fog machine into the studio for no reason other than to create a mysterious vibe. The machine ended up malfunctioning, filling the studio with so much fog that they had to pause recording and wait for it to clear. Ward later said that the fog was probably just as retro as the music. The release of FM Attack's second album, Deja Vu, in 2013, marked a major peak for the project. The album received widespread praise, and its lead single, Fade Away, became a staple in the synthwave scene. Ward joked that he felt like a retro superhero during this time, with fans embracing him as one of the key figures in the synthwave movement. His growing popularity led to performances at major electronic festivals, where Ward often found himself surrounded by fans decked out in neon and leg warmers. Another peak came with the release of the album Stellar in 2017, which further cemented FM Attack's place in the electronic music world. The album's sci-fi-inspired themes were a hit among fans, but Ward admitted that the title track almost didn't make the cut because he couldn't decide on the perfect spaceship sound effect. After spending hours experimenting, he finally settled on a sound from an old 80s video game, joking that it was out of this world. FM Attack's live shows during this time became known for their high energy and retro visuals. At one particularly memorable gig, the power went out mid-set, but instead of calling it a night, Ward led the crowd in an a cappella version of his song Magic. The fans loved it, and Ward later joked that it was the most low-tech moment of his high-tech career. As FM Attack's fame grew, Ward embraced his role as a leading figure in the synthwave genre, but he always kept his sense of humor. During one interview, he was asked about his thoughts on the future of electronic music, to which he responded, "If it doesn't have a synth solo, I'm not interested." He also became known for throwing retro-themed after-parties, where attendees were encouraged to come dressed in 80s attire. At one of these parties, Ward surprised guests by DJing an entire set using only cassette tapes. FM Attack's music began to feature in more and more media, including TV shows and video games, further boosting Ward's profile. Despite the growing attention, Ward often joked that his biggest accomplishment was convincing people that playing a synthesizer was just as cool as playing a guitar. His down-to-earth attitude and quirky sense of humor endeared him to fans, who appreciated the balance of seriousness and fun in his work. Shawn Ward, the man behind FM Attack, was born in Vancouver, Canada, and grew up with a love for all things music. As a child, he would often sneak into his older brother's room to play with his keyboard, which eventually sparked his passion for synthesizers. Ward once joked that he could have been a world-class athlete, but he chose synthesizers over soccer in high school. In interviews, Ward has often shared funny anecdotes about his obsession with vintage gear. At one point, his collection of old synthesizers grew so large that he had to convert his living room into a studio. His friends joked that he was one synth away from becoming a hoarder, but Ward insisted that every piece of gear had a story behind it. Ward's humor extends to his personal life as well. He once told a story about how his neighbors didn't know he was a musician until they heard him practicing one day and assumed he was working on a time machine. Rather than correct them, Ward played along, joking that he was taking them back to 1984, one synth line at a time. Though Shawn Ward is still very much alive and active in the music scene, he's had a few close calls with tour mishaps. During one tour, his equipment was accidentally sent to the wrong city, leaving him with no choice but to improvise with borrowed gear. Despite the challenges, Ward kept his sense of humor, later telling fans that it was his minimalist synthwave experiment. Ward's love for synthwave is matched only by his love for the culture that surrounds it. He has often said that if he weren't making music, he'd probably be running a retro arcade. His passion for all things 80s has made him a beloved figure in the synthwave community, and his humor continues to shine through in both his music and his interactions with fans.